Hello, my friends, or perhaps fellow travelers on the darker roads of existence. My name is Dr. Bonechill, and tonight I've got something for you that's different, not a gift, mind you, more like a whispered secret, something plucked from the shadowed corners of forgotten lives. You see, we all have them, don't we? Those little trinkets, those seemingly innocent finds at a yard sale, a flea market, a dusty antique shop. They call out to us, don't they? A cheap thrill, a forgotten memory, a bit of history to bring home. But what if that history isn't just a quaint story? What if it's a living, breathing thing, something that latches onto you, roots itself in your world, and slowly, irrevocably, begins to twist it? What if that bargain wasn't a bargain at all, but a horrifying revelation, a door flung open to something you can never ever unsee? Have you ever truly considered what kind of baggage comes with those forgotten treasures? Because sometimes, my friends, the price tag isn't just written in dollars and cents. Sometimes, it's etched in your very soul. Before we delve into the shadows, a quick word. If you find yourself drawn into these tales, if the chill starts to creep up your spine, please, hit that like button. It helps Dr. Bonechill reach more souls who crave a good scare. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. We're so close to 10,000 subscribers, and every one of you makes a difference. Finally, after you've heard what I have to say, leave a comment. Share your thoughts, your own eerie experiences, or just let me know what keeps you up at night. Your stories are just as important as mine. The porcelain doll's gaze it started, as these things often do, on a perfectly ordinary Saturday. The kind of Saturday where the air hung heavy and sweet with the scent of freshly cut grass, where the distant chatter of kids playing echoed through the suburban streets, and where the biggest decision of the day was which yard sale to hit first. My name's Arthur. I live in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing truly unsettling ever happens, or so I thought. I was on the hunt for old vinyl, maybe a forgotten first edition, something with a bit of character. This particular yard sale was a bit out of the way, down a cul-de-sac I'd never noticed before. The house was a modest ranch, well maintained, with a vibrant rosebush by the front porch. The usual spread of items was laid out on folding tables, chipped mugs, dusty books, worn-out board games. And then I saw her. She was tucked away in a shadowed corner, sitting on a child's miniature rocking chair. A porcelain doll. Her dress was a faded blue, adorned with tiny yellowed lace. Her hair, a tangled mess of brittle, straw-colored curls, framed a face that was, even then, unnerving. Wide, unblinking blue eyes, set in a meticulously painted, almost too perfect countenance. There was a faint crack running from her temple, down her cheek, and it gave her a peculiar, almost knowing expression. The woman running the sale, a kindly-looking elderly lady, told me she was part of her late mother's collection, that she just wanted her to go to a good home. I paid her $10. $10 for a piece of my piece. I brought her home. Of course, my wife Sarah thought she was creepy, but I had a soft spot for unusual things. I placed her on the mantelpiece in the living room, among some old family photos and a vase of dried flowers. At first, she was just there, an oddity, a conversation piece. Then, the little thing started. I'd be sitting in my armchair reading, and I'd feel it, a prickle on the back of my neck, the undeniable sensation of being watched. I'd glance up, and those cold blue eyes would be fixed on me. It was just a doll, I'd tell myself. The light must be playing tricks. But the feeling persisted, a cold tendril of unease coiling in my gut. One evening, I was alone in the house. Sarah was at her book club. I was flipping through channels, the news droning in the background, when I heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound, coming from the living room. It was rhythmic, like tiny fingernails dragging across wood. I froze, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I slowly pushed myself up from the couch, my eyes darting towards the mantelpiece. The doll, she was still there, perched on her chair, her blue eyes gleaming in the dim light of the room. But the scratching continued. It was coming from behind her. I walked over, my movements stiff and hesitant. As I got closer, the scratching stopped. I reached out, my fingers trembling slightly, and picked up the doll, and that's when I saw it. On the wooden surface of the mantelpiece, directly where the doll had been sitting, were faint, shallow gouges, like something had been meticulously carving into the wood. Tiny, almost unnoticeable lines. I wiped my finger over them, a shiver running down my spine. This wasn't right. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had bumped something. Maybe the cleaning lady had done it without me noticing. But the rationalizations felt hollow, like paper-thin shields against a growing dread. I moved the doll to a shelf in the spare bedroom, out of sight. hoping the distance would break whatever strange spell she was casting. That it didn't work. The sense of being watched intensified. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I heard faint whispers, like dry leaves rustling outside my bedroom window, even when there was no wind. I'd find small objects in the house subtly rearranged. A book I'd left on the nightstand would be on the floor. A picture frame on the dresser would be skewed at an odd angle. Sarah noticed it too, at first just dismissing it as her own forgetfulness, but then she started seeing things, too. Fleeting glimpses of movement in her peripheral vision, a shadow darting across the hallway when no one was there. The doll, realized, wasn't just observing, she was learning, and she was beginning to assert her presence. One morning, I walked into the kitchen to make coffee, and there, sitting neatly on the counter, was a small antique key. It wasn't one of ours. I had no idea where it came from. My breath hitched in my throat when I realized it was the same dull, tarnished brass as the tiny locket I'd seen around the doll's neck when I first bought her, a locket I hadn't paid much attention to until now. I went into the spare bedroom, my heart pounding a frantic drum against my ribs. The doll was sitting on the shelf, just as I'd left her, but her head was tilted slightly, just a fraction of an inch, but enough to be noticeable. And her eyes, they seemed to glitter with a malicious amusement. I picked her up, my fingers brushing against the tiny locket. It was firmly closed. I tried to pry it open, but it wouldn't budge. I looked at the key in my hand, then back at the locket. It was a perfect fit. My hands were shaking as I inserted the key into the locket. There was a faint click, and it sprang open. Inside, tucked away, was a tiny folded piece of parchment. It was old, brittle, and the ink was faded, but I could make out the words a name, not a person's name. A place, an address that was just a few blocks away, in an older part of town I rarely visited, and beneath the address, scrawled in what looked like a different hand, a single, chilling phrase: she watches, she waits, she takes. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with a palpable dread. The doll's porcelain face, usually so inert, seemed to twist into something resembling a sneer. I dropped her. She landed with a sickening thud on the hardwood floor, one of her legs snapping off with a sharp crack. I stared at her, then at the parchment in my hand, the address, the message. A cold certainty settled over me, a truth so horrifying it threatened to shatter my very sanity. This doll wasn't just a doll. She was a conduit, a key, and she was leading me somewhere. Somewhere I instinctively knew I shouldn't go, but the compulsion was overwhelming. Her eyes, even from the broken figure on the floor, seemed to command me. They promised a revelation, a terrifying understanding, and I, like a moth to a flame, felt myself inexorably drawn to it. The porcelain doll, a seemingly harmless find at a yard sale, had opened a door to a darkness I never knew existed, and now it was demanding to be walked through, and I knew, with a horrifying certainty, that no matter what I did, I would never be the same again. The music box's lullaby. The second item I stumbled upon was a music box, not one of those delicate, ornate things you see in antique shops, all polished wood and intricate carvings. This one was plain, almost crude, made of a dark, unidentifiable metal, tarnished with age. I found it at another yard sale, this one just a few blocks from my own house, hosted by a family who were moving cross-country, and clearly just wanted to offload everything. It was tucked away in a dusty cardboard box filled with old children's toys, a headless doll, a faded teddy bear, a collection of mismatched marbles. The lid was simple, unadorned, save for a faint, almost imperceptible etching of what looked like a stylized, leafless tree. It caught my eye because it looked ancient, out of place among the plastic junk. I picked it up. It was heavier than it looked, cold to the touch, even on that warm summer afternoon. I asked the young woman running the sale how much she wanted for it. She just shrugged, distracted by her own kids. $5. Whatever, just take it. I took it. I figured it would make a quirky paperweight for my desk. The winding key on the back was stiff, rusty, but I managed to turn it a few times. There was a faint click, and then a tune began to play. It wasn't a familiar melody, no nursery rhyme or classical piece. It was slow, haunting, composed of simple, repetitive notes that seemed to echo with a strange, melancholic beauty. It was the kind of tune that settles deep in your bones, a melody that feels like a memory you can't quite place, yet it tugs at something primal within you. I brought it home and placed it on my study desk. Sarah, my wife, didn't even notice it at first. The tune, I discovered, only played for a short while before winding down. I'd wind it up before I started working, letting the strange melody fill the quiet room. It was strangely soothing, a quiet companion to my thoughts. But then, as with the doll, the subtleties began to warp. It started with my dreams. Vivid, unsettling dreams. Not nightmares, not in the traditional sense, but more like fragmented memories that weren't my own. I'd dream of a child, always alone, always humming that same melancholic tune. Sometimes the child would be in a dark, empty room. Other times, wandering through a desolate field under a bruised twilight sky. There was always a sense of profound loneliness, a pervasive sorrow that clung to me even after I woke up. I'd wake in a cold sweat, the music box's melody still echoing in my mind, as if it had seeped into my subconscious. Then came the sounds, faint at first, a soft, almost imperceptible humming, just at the edge of my hearing. I'd pause, strain my ears, but it would vanish. I dismissed it as my imagination, a remnant of those unsettling dreams, but the humming grew more distinct, more frequent. I'd be in the living room, reading, and I'd hear it unmistakably, coming from my study. I'd go in, expecting to find the music box playing, but it would be silent, its lid closed. Yet the faint echo of the tune would linger in the air, ghost of a sound. One afternoon I was working on my computer, lost in a particularly complicated spreadsheet, when the music box started playing. On its own, I hadn't touched it all day. I hadn't wound it. My blood ran cold. The slow, mournful tune filled the room, each note resonating with an unearthly clarity. I stared at the box, my mind racing, trying to find a logical explanation, a faulty mechanism, a vibration. But the sound was too perfect, too deliberate. It played for its usual brief duration, then clicked silent. I stood up, slowly, my eyes fixed on the metal box. I reached out a trembling hand and picked it up. It was still cold, impossibly cold, as if it had been sitting in a freezer. The dreams intensified after that. They became more focused, more disturbing. I saw the child clearly now, a little girl with wide, sorrowful eyes and tangled dark hair. She was always holding something, a small wooden bird, and she was always singing the music box's tune, but her voice was filled with an unbearable grief. In one dream, I saw her bury the bird in a shallow grave, humming the melody as tears streamed down her face. In another, she was trying to talk to someone, a figure I couldn't quite make out, but the words were choked, lost in the overwhelming sound of the music. I started to feel burdened. A deep, pervasive sadness settled over me, a weight I couldn't shake. Simple tasks felt monumental. My usual cheerfulness evaporated, replaced by a quiet, brooding melancholy. Sarah noticed it. She'd asked me what was wrong, if I was sick. I couldn't explain it. How could I tell her a $5 music box was siphoning my joy, replacing it with another's sorrow? The music box wasn't just playing its tune, it was implanting something within me, a resonance, a memory that wasn't my own. I found myself humming the melody unconsciously, sometimes even in conversation. My friends would look at me strangely. Sarah would ask, "What's that tune, Arthur? It sounds so sad." One night I woke up screaming. The dream had been agonizingly real. I was the little girl. I felt her despair, her absolute, crushing loneliness. I felt the earth under my tiny hands as I buried the wooden bird. I felt the burning sting of tears. And when I woke, the music box was playing, faintly, from the study. But it wasn't just the melody. It was also the sound of a child weeping, a soft, heartbroken sob, weaving in and out of the notes. I stumbled out of bed, my heart hammering, and practically tore open the study door. The room was dark, save for the faint moonlight filtering through the window. The music box sat on my desk, its lid closed, yet the mournful tune and the child's sobs filled the air. I rushed to it, my hands shaking, and snatched it up. It burned, my fingers, an unnatural cold that felt like fire. I threw it against the wall, that it hit with a dull clang, but it didn't break. The tune continued, undiminished, and the sobs grew louder, more piercing, filling the room with an unbearable sorrow. I watched, horrified, as a faint, shimmering outline began to form around the fallen music box, a small, transparent figure, the little girl from my dreams. Her eyes, filled with an ancient, unbearable grief, were fixed on me. She wasn't angry, she was just sad, and she was humming the music box's tune, her phantom voice weaving with the actual sound. I backed away, stumbling over my own feet. The sobs escalated into a wail, a sound of pure, unadulterated heartbreak that tore through me. And in that wail, I felt something shift inside myself. A piece of me, a part of my own joy, my own light, was being pulled, drained away. The music box wasn't just a source of a spooky tune. It was a conduit for a lingering, profound sorrow, a burden that was now becoming my own. The little girl's grief, trapped within its cold metal, was reaching out, seeking a new vessel. And I, Arthur, had been foolish enough to pick it up. The music box, still humming its mournful lullaby, had found its new home, and it wasn't leaving, not ever. Very well. Brace yourself. The tarnished pocket watch, my third acquisition, the one that sealed my fate, was a pocket watch. This was from yet another suburban yard sale, a sprawling affair held by a family clearing out a deceased relative's estate. It was a beautiful day, the kind where children's laughter floated on the gentle breeze and the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with blooming jasmine. I was sifting through a box of old tools, thinking of some minor repairs around the house, when my fingers brushed against something smooth, cold, and strangely heavy. It was a pocket watch tucked beneath a rusted wrench. Its casing was tarnished, almost black with age, but beneath the grime I could just make out intricate engravings, swirling vines and tiny, unidentifiable creatures. The face was yellowed, the Roman numerals faded, and both hands were stuck, precisely at 11 minutes past 2. It had no chain, no accompanying fob, just the watch itself, isolated and forlorn. I picked it up. It hummed faintly in my palm, a low, almost imperceptible vibration that felt oddly resonant, as if it were a tiny, dormant heart. The old woman running the sale, her eyes tired but kind, saw me holding it. "Oh, that old thing," she said. Her voice, raspy, belonged to my great-uncle. "Never worked in my lifetime. Just take it if you want it," clearing everything out. I offered her $1. She waved it away. "No dear, just take it." I took it home and placed it on my nightstand, next to my alarm clock. It was an interesting piece, certainly. I tried to wind it to move the hands, but it remained stubbornly inert, frozen at 2:11. I even opened the back casing, hoping to find a loose spring or a simple mechanism that just needed a nudge. But the inner workings were a confusing tangle of tiny, impossibly small gears and levers, all seemingly locked in place. I put it back on the nightstand, a silent, beautiful relic. Then the dreams started. Unlike the music box dreams, which were sorrowful and shared, these were intensely personal, disorienting, and utterly terrifying. They always began the same way. I was walking through my own house, but everything was subtly wrong. The colors were muted, the air thick and heavy, and a pervasive, low hum filled every corner. And then, at precisely 2:11 a.m., the hum would intensify, and the world would warp. I'd find myself in a different moment, a sliver of time that wasn't my own. Sometimes I was in my own living room, but it was pristine, untouched by years of living, a ghostly snapshot of a past I hadn't inhabited. Other times, I was outside, on my street, but the houses were different. The trees younger or older, the cars alien and archaic. I would stand there, a silent, invisible observer, as brief, unsettling vignettes unfolded. A child crying in the distance, a woman's muffled scream from a neighbor's house, the harsh whispered argument of unseen figures just beyond a hedgerow. These weren't fully formed narratives, just unsettling fragments, glimpses into something dark and forgotten. And every time, as the scene dissolved, the digital clock on my nightstand would snap from 2:10 to 2:11, startling me awake in a cold sweat. The pocket watch, of course, remained motionless, its hands fixed at that precise time. The reality of my waking hours began to bleed into the dreams, and vice versa. I'd be walking through my neighborhood during the day, and for a fleeting second, the familiar houses would flicker, replaced by the older, subtly distorted versions from my dreams. A car would pass, and for a split second, it would morph into an antique model. The sounds of my normal life, a dog barking, a siren wailing, would occasionally be overlaid with the faint, unsettling sounds from my nocturnal visions. The muffled scream, the child's distant cry. I grew paranoid. I started avoiding looking at clocks around 2 a.m., as if averting my gaze could somehow ward off the inevitable shift. I tried moving the watch. I put it in a drawer. I locked it in a box in the garage. But no matter where I hid it, the dreams continued, growing more vivid, more insistent. And sometimes, when I'd returned to the spot where I'd hidden the watch, it would have moved, not far, just enough to tell me it wasn't static, a few inches, a slight tilt, a chilling message that it was still connected, still working its strange magic. One night, the dream was different. I was in my own bedroom, standing by the window. The world outside was the muted, eerie version I'd come to dread. And then, at 2:11 a.m., something else happened. The hum intensified, but instead of shifting me to a past moment, it pulled something into my present. A shadow, not a person, but a profound absence of light, coalesced in the corner of my room. It moved, slowly, deliberately, towards my bed where Sarah lay sleeping. I tried to scream, to move, to warn her, but I was frozen, an unseen spectre in my own nightmare. The shadow reached the bed, and for a terrifying moment, it hovered over Sarah, radiating an intense cold that I could feel even in my dream state. Then, it recoiled, not in fear, but as if it had found nothing to take. And as it receded, the dream shifted, and I was pulled back into a new, equally horrifying scene. I was in the neighbor's yard, the one 2 houses down. It was night, and the shadowy figures were there, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. They were burying something in the flower bed, not deep, just enough to conceal it. And as they finished, the man pulled out a small, tarnished object. It was a pocket watch, and he set its hands, with a grim determination. 2 to 11. I woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat. The digital clock on my nightstand showed 2:12 a.m. The pocket watch was exactly where I'd left it, on the nightstand, its hands still at 2:11. But something was different. The low hum which I had only felt in my dreams was now palpable in the room, a deep, resonant vibration that made my teeth ache. I knew, with a horrifying certainty, what the watch was. It wasn't just a time stopper, it was a focal point, a dark anchor. The dreams weren't just dreams, they were echoes, reverberations from the moments it had frozen in time. The whispers, the screams, the shadows, they were the lingering residue of past horrors, trapped by the watch, forced to replay. And the shadowy figure that had visited my bedroom, it wasn't there to take me. It was looking for something else, something the watch had been used to conceal, to pause in its passage through time. The next morning, I went to my neighbor's house. I knew them, of course, a pleasant, quiet couple. I knocked on their door, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. I asked them, trying to sound casual, if they'd ever found anything odd in their garden, particularly the flower bed. The wife looked at me strangely, but the husband, a man named Mr. Henderson, paused. His eyes, usually calm, held a flicker of something haunted. He cleared his throat. "Well, son," he said slowly, "my great-uncle used to live here. He had a way with things, and he was very particular about that flower bed." He looked at the flower bed, then back at me, a strange, knowing look on his face. "Never touch that flower bed," he used to say, "never. Some things are best left buried." I walked away, my blood running cold. The pocket watch, sitting on my nightstand, wasn't just a collector's item, it was a key, a pause button on reality, a way to trap and revisit moments of horror. And the thing that had been buried, the thing the shadow was looking for, it was still out there, its existence held in a perpetual, silent loop by the tarnished pocket watch. I now owned a device that didn't just show time, but warped it, imprisoned it, and beckoned forth the dark things that lingered within its frozen moments. And I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I was no longer just Arthur. I was now a part of its terrible, unending story. And so, my friends, you've heard the tales. 3 seemingly innocuous finds, plucked from the unassuming familiarity of a suburban yard sale. A doll that watched and revealed, a music box that wept and shared its sorrow, a pocket watch that froze time and brought forth lingering shadows. They aren't just stories, are they? They're reflections, distorted mirrors of what might be lurking in the forgotten corners of our own lives. If these whispers from the dark have resonated with you, if they've left you with that delicious chill, then please consider hitting that like button. It truly helps Dr. Bonechill bring more such revelations into the light. And if you haven't yet joined our gathering, subscribe to the channel. We're building a community here, one shiver at a time. Finally, I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts? What are your own experiences with the uncanny, the unsettling? Comment below and share your own brush with the inexplicable. Because sometimes, the most terrifying truths are the ones we uncover ourselves, aren't they? And sometimes, the very things we seek out for a bargain turn out to demand the highest price of all.